Hi, friends. Welcome again to another episode of Beyond the Cloud's Edge to Edge Transformation. And speaking of Edge to Edge Transformation, I got to know this amazing guy called Rajan during the early days of what used to be called semiconductor IP. And even at that time, he was pushing things at the edge, at the envelope. Rajan, tell us about your story. How did you end up doing things like virtual chips, real chips, and now the fabric? I have no idea how you come up with all these interesting ideas.
Thanks very much, Shankar. You and I go a long way back from the EDA days when I first met up with you. And as we shared stories earlier, we have had a lot of mutual connects. People who were good friends of yours who worked with me at Virtual Chips, who were singularly responsible for helping the company succeed, and fortunate enough to get here myself. But before we get to virtual chips, one of my earliest entrepreneurial venture, I'd like to rewind the clock a little bit and maybe tell you what got me there. And it is a confluence of various factors, and I cannot point to one single thing. First, when I came to the US from India, actually, it was the prodding of my father. Very fortunate to have a father who came from a very small village, tiny village in the interior of Tamil Nadu, and became the youngest chairman of BHEL at the age of 42. Mind you, when he left his village, he did not know how to speak English. When he went to college first at Loyola College, his favorite story was they wouldn't serve to him because he could only speak Tamil. And how he got into the Indian Administrative Service, and from there, over a period of time, became chairman of BHL. He was my inspiration as to how you can overcome enormous odds. As powerful and as successful he was, he had no money. In those days, these were government-run companies. You did it for career success, for making an impact, not as much for financial rewards. He felt that the fact that he was born in a socialist India was the reason he could not become an entrepreneur himself. And India was still socialist when I graduated. I remember him telling me very distinctively that you have to go to the US because they know how to do business. The environment is conducive for being an entrepreneur. That simple sentence kind of stuck with me. I went and did my business degree, but I felt like initially like a fish out of water, being a technical person. And I joined Clarkson University. And that changed the course of my life. That move from business, having got my MBA, but went back to get my MS in electrical engineering and semiconductor physics, changed the course of my career. One is I met a wonderful professor who was my advisor named Professor Domingos. So I would say in the order of my father pushed me to come here, and his career was an inspiration. Second is Domingos set me on the path towards a cutting edge work in semiconductors. One of the biggest problem was in ESD when I graduated, and I did some really core work in the ESD space under Professor Domingos. That landed me my first job at Fairchild Semiconductor. And that also landed me in the Valley. I remember when I first came to the Valley for an interview, I had barely dropped off my resume in the morning. And by the evening, I had Fairchild, AMD, Intel, all of them wanting me to interview the next day. And by next evening, I had an offer from Fairchild. I said, this Valley is amazing. You could come here in 2 days, find a job. It was just mind-blowing. And 1982 was when there was a recession, end of 1981 and 82. And during that period, I was able to find an excellent job which fit my background. Moving forward, Fairchild actually shut down within 8 months their division in South San Jose, and they wanted to move me back to the East Coast in Maine. And I said, I'm not going back to cold country. What's a guy from Chennai doing in minus 40 degrees weather? And I decided I want to stay in the Valley. Next morning, I got a job with a startup, with my very first startup called VLSI Technologies. It's a technology which became Avasem, which was a clock chip company, which became very successful in its own right. But that was my first exposure to a startup. I saw Mark Vidry, who used to be at Fairchild, and Venki, who was one of the early people, was my boss, go through struggles, but saw them shape a company very successfully. So that was my first inspiration of what a startup possibility is how you can create and how you can evolve and how you can pivot. Soon thereafter, I joined Cirrus Logic. My thought process to become an entrepreneur started VLSI, but really firmed up at Cirrus Logic. So I worked very closely for Suhas Patil. And I also was surrounded with stories about Kanwal Rekhi, about Vinod Khosla. And I said, I have to do a startup. And I was fortunate to run into a person named Chetan Saya, who became a good friend. And we together started a company called Ravi Technologies in 1990. And we were young, I would say almost kids. Chetan was younger to me. And I had to figure out a way to get the company funded. And I said I would do some consulting work. And my core background being in semiconductor, and I was building libraries at Cirrus Logic. And also I had developed a passion for software also at Cirrus Logic. I was in the software team of Cirrus Logic. So I was not only developing libraries, I was developing the supporting software infrastructure. And then subsequent to from Cirrus Logic, I had gone into chips and technology where I was working. You asked me about PCI and how did I come up with the idea of PCIs, is I was working on the precursor to PCI as bus interfaces, ISA, EISA, then PCI came along. It didn't seem to make sense that I was designing the same interface 3 different ways, so 4 different ways at 4 different times, and it should be a repeatable process. So that was in my mind. At the same time, I was fascinated with software because I saw the valley transforming itself into a software valley beyond just being a silicon valley. So the confluence of these two is the one that got me started on my entrepreneurial journey. From Ravi Technologies, initially, by the way, Ravi was my son's name, so his first company I named after him. As I was working on these libraries, and I was using that monies to be funding, at the time, an object-oriented database software. Chetan was a specialist in that. We were trying to build this object-oriented database. But I pretty soon came to realize there was a great opportunity in building reusable libraries. And one of the most value-add reusable library I came to the conclusion was PCI, which was the next step beyond EISA, which was the bus interface. And I said, why not I create both a test environment and a reusable block, and customers should be able to buy it. That is how I got into my second company, which was Virtual Chips. I told Chetan he was an expert in software. He should take and run with the database side. I would move on to the space that I was very good at, which was in the bus interface designs and in the semiconductor IP space. So that was the inspiration for Virtual Chips. And I was very fortuitous to run into 2 people who I would say singularly credit for my success. One was Raj Singh, who was my colleague at Cirrus, but who wrote one of the first checks for Virtual Chips. And the second person was Tampy Thomas. Tampy was the founder of NextGen, which AMD acquired for over $1 billion. And I still don't know why, but both Raj and Tampy seem to like me for whatever reason. And when I pitched to them the idea that there is possibility of doing reusable intellectual property, at that time I didn't quite elegantly phrase it that way. I said we could do reusable PCI, you could do reusable Ethernet, reusable USBs, and they got captivated with it. And Tampy agreed to come on to my board as an advisor, as an investor, in fact, as a part-time co-founder. I managed to get him to come. And one of the most essential elements of the success of Virtual Chips was not just the fact that we were creating a vision of a semiconductor IP industry, which we were one of the pioneers, was the fact also that marketing was very, very important. At Cirrus, I saw what marketing did to the company. And Tampy kept emphasizing to me how marketing and go-to-market motions are as important as technology. And because of his guidance, I put a focus on attracting the best of the people in that space. You and I know we have had mutual connects in the EDA space. There was Kathleen Levitt, who joined me as VP of Marketing, but earlier than that, Martin Harding, who came on as both VP of Sales and Marketing for me. Martin, Kathleen, then Tom Anderson, who came on as VP of Engineering, Tom O'Connell, who came on to be the Chief Architect. It was an absolute pleasure to work with some of the brightest minds and to create a pioneering effort in the semiconductor IP space. And Virtual Chips, fortunately, was quite successful. It got bought by Phoenix Technologies, subsequently spun out as InSilicon in the IPO market. But that is what got me started on the entrepreneurial journey. There is a series of people who helped me. There was also the fact, for some reason, and I can never explain it myself, why did that idea strike me, but that I can sort of logically look back. I was working on libraries, I was working on interfaces, system interfaces. I had inspiration of people who were around me, also a lot of help, Raj Singh, Thampi Thomas, all of these people. So you never get to where you are without a lot of luck, but also without a lot of people helping you and a lot of inspiration for people who have, set the path ahead of you.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? Libraries until then were considered a cost center, very similar to the story of Amazon Web Service, AWS, which was these are like enormous cost centers creating library, maintaining them, updating them, the interfaces. They never were supposed to make money. So you went from a cost center to literally a profit center, in other words, a viable business model, and reduce the cost for dozens. Now it's like one of the biggest industries today. You can't have a fab without an ecosystem of great IP. You went from business school to engineering school and then really got into building the business. What was it like to take a cost center and make a profit center out of it?
Well, one is, I can tell you, is from within, it was quite exciting because it felt very pioneering. It was doing something that was not done before. The second part was it was absolutely scary, to be honest. 32-year-old kid, almost, now I look back at it, 31, 32, when I first conceived of the idea, I was about 30 years old. It is very young. The good part is I had no idea what I did not know. Sometimes it's a blessing. You tend to do things because you think it is possible when most people tell you it's not possible. When I first thought of semiconductor IP, people said nobody would buy their core intellectual property from outside. Turned out not to be the case. As much as Virtual Chips was a pioneer, and I'm very proud about it, if I were to roll back the clock 30 years back, I would have loved to have just stayed the course and not sold the company and built an industry like ARM has done very successfully, which was also an IP company which emerged around the same time. There's always a time and place for things to happen. And I happen to be fortunate to be hitting the market at the right time with the same ideas. ARM, of course, has gone on to become an amazing success. Virtual Chips pioneered a lot of things. It went public. It became the core part of Synopsys's IP effort after they acquired InSilicon, which was the next version of Virtual Chips as it went IPO. So yeah, to answer your question, it was quite exhilarating to see how positively people reacted to the offering. You could see an absolute product market fit. I remember the exciting times that Martin, myself would sit down and say, how do we go from $500,000 per year revenue to $6 million? And it all happened within a matter of maybe 14 months. Wow. It was like 10x growth. And that is part of the reason why Phoenix Technologies almost immediately acquired us. We were one of the fastest growing companies.
Yeah, and that was unheard of in the hardware industry, where creating silicon would take years in those days. Even now, it's not so simple when you're building real hardware. Now, Before we go into your newer ventures in the fabric and others, I have a question. Pat Gelsinger, CEO of Intel, was talking about the siliconomy. What are your thoughts on that? Now that you've done hardware, you've done software, you've done entire systems, how real is this economy? Is it really changing the way we live our lives?
Absolutely. In fact, it is rather gratifying to see that silicon is now making an enormous comeback as an industry in the Silicon Valley. Mind you, as I mentioned to you, I started off in core silicon. Then I saw the evolution of the industry going to software, which my subsequent companies became more and more software oriented. And now silicon has emerged. It is pervasive in everything that we do. The intelligence, the fact that AI cannot deliver to you without having silicon and the compute capabilities and the additional capabilities that silicon brings to that. It becomes very, very important. Hence the resurgence of semiconductor in the Silicon Valley. It is absolutely real.
Something more relevant to what you're doing is the cloud. For a
Yes.
while, it looked like we went from mainframes to individual PCs and workstations, and now back to the cloud, and everything would happen in the cloud. And now we are hearing about not only cloud native, but edge native. What's going on here?
Well, for people who are probably as old as I am, maybe you may even you may, Shankar, have heard of it. Is we used to have this time sharing of computers. I used to. I remember the days when we used to time share on a mainframe. We had terminals, and then I had this modem. We would dial in, and then I would hook up to a mainframe where I would get a time slice.
IBM 350, 360,
Exactly.
BDP 11 deck.
Yes. I
Yeah,
almost feel like the cloud is the modern version of the timeshare that we used to do and the compute that was assigned to us on the IBM mainframes that I used to operate on. Uh, yeah, it seems like the same themes keep coming back, albeit in different forms and more sophisticated forms. We went from the time that you had mainframes, then you went to the mid-size compute capabilities, this client-server architecture, to the PC, which is almost like the edge right now. It's everybody had their own full set of and then it slowly has worked it back, but computers now getting centralized into the cloud. And then you are then again decentralizing it back to the edges and again pushing that all the way to your mobile device, if you will. So this trend is very real. The edge is now transforming the way people are able to do various different applications in a much more powerful manner and much more personalized manner in terms of what they get. So we in the fabric, for example, have a company called Cloudbrink, which is leveraging the edge to deliver high quality user experience on people with security, on people having mobile devices, how workspace is being reimagined. You know, people are doing hybrid workspaces, people are working from home, people are working from remote places, and many times they are as productive and as secure as they would be if you're sitting at an enterprise physical building. And why is that possible? It's possible because of edge compute coming into place. And Cloudbrink is one example of a company which is pioneering the effort through the use of the edge to deliver high quality security and other things. So, yeah. And the other place where it is having tremendous effect is IoT, where a lot of the edge is being leveraged on very effectively. You could even call the fact that cars are becoming smarter being the edge, the very edge of the edge in terms of what the edge can be envisioned as. So compute is no longer centralized as just cloud. It is going everything from a handheld device pervasive to the edge all the way to the cloud. It's a series of edges, if you will, to the cloud.
Wow, I like that. Series of edges to the cloud. It's like a crystalline thing, huh?
That's
So
right.
now, what I find interesting, Rajan, is that besides being able to give all these entrepreneurs the opportunity to create new companies at the Fabric, you also have some unique business models and ways in which you work with these people, these founders. Can you get into that a little bit?
Certainly. Mind you, if I look at the core of my personal experience, the reason I've been able to create all these companies is because you have to take a holistic view of what it takes to build a company. Many technologists come out thinking it's all about technology, and it is a lot more than that. You have to not only think about technology, you have to think about the product market fit, which particular application it can serve. In fact, if you take a step back, you have to first realize which market are you targeting, and is the market large enough that people would care of any product that you bring into that space. You can bring the best technology, but if the market doesn't exist, who cares? So the fabric itself took V-shaped Prabhakar and I would give a lot of credit for the fabric success also to my partner Prabhakar, who you have interviewed before, who's a pioneering technologist, is the fact that we said we would take a market first approach rather than a pure technology first approach. We first assess how big is the market for this? Is there a market large enough that you can make an impactful company? The second part of the problem that we try to guide the entrepreneurs is once we come up with the core of an idea and fabric, what I would say is what it is a co-creation entity. We call it a co-creator. We co-found companies with entrepreneurs. We not only come up with the broad idea and the market that we should target, we then work with what the smart technologists to see what would be a technology appropriate for the market. So we start with market first, a product market fit, a technology that fits, that could create the product, and also the other elements of infrastructure that is needed to create a company. To create a successful company, you have to first create a successful culture. You have to attract the best talent. You have to be able to convince pioneering, early adopter customers to be able to adopt what you're talking about, to be able to collaborate with you. And you have to also attract great engineering talent to build the best kind of product. And you have to be able to sell to investors as to why they should invest in you. These are all the elements which have to be tied together to create a company. When I started Virtual Chips, for example, the guidance that Thampi provided to me as an individual to think about the various elements in building up a successful company, we at Fabric have tried to formalize it so that we can help entrepreneurs to create companies. This is how we are able to, well, Thampi worked with me as an individual. We tried to scale that into a model. So, which enabled us to create now 12 different companies from within the Fabric. We work with entrepreneurs. We say, okay, you need not only a technologist, but you need a product management person, you need a go-to-market person, you need a CEO, and at the same time, you have to be able to attract a variety of different kind of talent. All of these, we try to formalize it into a process by which we can make entrepreneurs successful. And that is what makes the Fabric unique. Besides the focus, we are highly focused. We are focused on the cloud infrastructure space. That is where we created the companies, because that is the place where my recent past experience has been working with Prabhakar when we created Ankeena. And when we first started VeloCloud, mind you, VeloCloud was an idea which was born before we created the Fabric. Prabhakar and I were brainstorming what next after we sold our company to Juniper Networks. What is the next biggest trend in the industry? And in 2011, when we were brainstorming, Prabhakar said, in fact, in a hallway conversation, he said, Rajan, we should look at the cloud. Juniper is very good and very effective in the telecommunications market. And I was noodling the idea is probably the next generation of CPE devices make a lot of sense. And as I was leaving Juniper in 2012, and Prabhakar soon thereafter left after I did, he said, Rajan, while the telcos are a great customers, the biggest area where revolution is taking place is the cloud. And there's a whole series of opportunities and challenges which will come up when you try to go to the cloud. And that is how the concept of VeloCloud started. We and I came up with the fact that you need to be able to connect to the cloud in a secure fashion from an enterprise branch. In fact, we initially thought of as an individual, but enterprise branch became the logical part. And once we started, we said, well, if there is one idea that we can come up so quickly with, there must be dozens if there's a secular trend towards the cloud. So why not we create an umbrella organization which can help incubate initially multiple companies? But we said we are to think beyond incubation. We said Sumant Mandal, who is our third partner in this effort, used to work at Idea Labs. And he told Prabhakar, now you guys should create the Idea Labs of the cloud space. And hence was born the Fabric, which was focused on the cloud infrastructure space.
Wow. Now, this is really remarkable that you've been able to work with a variety of entrepreneurs. Sanjay Uppal was my classmate, and it's just amazing how, besides creating VeloCloud as a successful company, how it's changing VMware and growing their market share in all these related spaces.
Absolutely. And Sanjay Uppal, we were very fortuitous to run into Sanjay Uppal as we were thinking about the concept of VeloCloud. And this is where serendipity comes in, that Prabhakar and I were at an event at TIE. And this is a plug for TIE, if you will. The TIE created a forum where Sanjay happened to be there, and we were talking to him, and he got fascinated with the concept we were playing with. And he said, I'd like to work with you guys, formalize this idea into a more concrete company. And that's how VeloCloud was born. Many of these companies, the one aspect which I have not talked about, but which has been important in all of these is how do you create not only a company, but how do you create a scalable engineering organizations as you plan for the future in this? And from my virtual chip days, one of the things which I'm most proud about was that I established at Virtual Chips our first operation, in fact, at Ravi Technologies, which is a predecessor to Virtual Chips, the first India Development Center, and of all the places in Chennai, which at that time was called Madras. And we were one of the first people to pioneer advanced technologies. Not in those days, setting up a company in India was hard enough. Bangalore was the only logical choice. But I set it up in Chennai because I felt that there was a base of talent in Chennai which was not being leveraged. And not everybody wants to go to Bangalore. There's a whole possibility. And it was also a place where I could have easily attract talent because they could do advanced work without having to shift their hometown. And over a period of time, we built up multiple India development centers, and I was able to build up a team of people who worked with me startup to startup. And at Ankeena, we scaled that considerably further. And we had this person named Ramnath, who I first met in 1998 at Virtual Chips to head up the India operation. He has now worked with us through multiple startups. And at Fabric, he headed our technology development center in India. And he would be the one who would incubate the technology first, to experiment with it, to play with the prototypes. And this was all possible because of the technology center we set up in India, in Chennai.
This is amazing. It's not just creating one organization, but a series. And we've seen that in the history of technology. To formalize that is amazing. If you look at, for example, the way Y Combinator and then OpenAI and a whole bunch of startups are starting, there is no reason for you folks to just stay within the cloud. The whole world is exploding right now. Do you have any plans of expanding beyond silicon, beyond the cloud, into other related or unrelated industries?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, now that the cloud encompasses a lot of things, even within the Fabric, we created companies which the core technology was the AI. So AI cannot be thought of in isolation. It is part of the infrastructure. We leveraged AI for observability, for security, for other purposes. And on my own personal front, both Prabhakar and I personally, we are involved in a pure AI company like TrueLark, which is a company that we are involved in, which is a conversational AI, and now it is leveraging Gen AI for delivering value to its customers. So we saw AI clearly as one of the big thrusts that we have to keep an eye on. And we have to pay attention, learn more about it, see how we can leverage AI in all its forms. It is not just Gen AI, which is the buzzword of the day, but a variety of different manifestations of AI to deliver value to customers. And that is a place where we see that there is a lot of value, and there's a lot of personal interest for myself is to look into that, is to be involved in that space.
Now, again, when I look at your career, you started off in physics, business, chip design, IP, the whole IP industry, and then into now the fabric and the cloud. Uh, I don't think you would have imagined doing this when you started your career. The rate at which technology is changing today, how should young people or anybody starting in their career, how should they get started? And likewise, somebody mid-career like me, I want to do different things. How would we pivot into different spaces?
I don't know if I have formulated this as a process to be able to pivot into different sectors, but I can tell you one thing is to be keeping your ears open and to not be afraid of taking risks if there is a space that interests you. As you mentioned, I started off personally in core semiconductor physics, essentially. And from there, moved on to semiconductor IPs, from there moved into systems, from there moved into software, then into cloud, and now doing work in the AI space. To a large degree, the success of the human race in general is being flexible, malleable, and adapting to changing circumstances. And you should be open and keep your mind open to absorbing new ideas and see how you can generate value in that space. That is the first thing. The second is not to be afraid of taking risks. When I walked out of my job at Chips and Technology, which I was doing quite well, to do my first startup, I must say it was scary. I had at home 2 children, and I was walking out of a very well-paying job to take a risk of starting a company. But I wanted to do something meaningful beyond just drawing a paycheck. I thought I could make an impact. I thought I could make a difference. And the willingness to be able to take risks to follow your passion is important, for sure. The third thing which helped me a lot in this whole process is persistence, is working through the difficulties, staying. There were times when I never felt that I can build a real company. It was difficult to sell the IP, the libraries, but then over a period of time, I could crack the formula out to how to go about selling it. It took me nearly 3+ years to crack that formula. So ability to be persistent is key. And the fourth is surround yourself with people who can guide you. Mentors were extremely critical. Getting a mentor itself is a very hard thing. You have to convince them the most valuable thing people can give you is not money, but the most valuable thing they can give you is time. Time is something you can never get back. The fact that Tanti was willing to give me time, the fact that Raj Singh was willing to give me time was extremely important. And I was not going to ignore their advice. I was going to take their inputs. I was going to see what the value that they had generated from their career was very important. And finally, of course, dumb luck is extremely important. So all of these things matter as you build your company.
So, one of the interesting things that you mentioned, and we see it again and again, is that in order to have technology, in particular computer technology or any technology, we need ecosystems. We need schools, colleges, students, people, raw materials, and so on. But isn't that going to increase the digital divide? Because many places don't have that. If you go to remote places, we don't have that kind of capability. Is there something going on that can reduce or change the digital divide?
Yeah, one of the passions as I've come to the late stages of my career is education. We discussed it earlier. You had free schooling, if you will, to get you started. I was very fortunate that India systemically provided a lot of us, even for the fortunate ones, free education. My college was almost free. My schooling was almost free. I remember the fees were 10 rupees a month. Even in those days, 10 rupees is probably like 1 cent today. There is absolutely a digital divide. There are people who are fortunate who have families who can support them and guide them. And there are people who cannot. In order to bridge this, at least the passion that my wife and I both are heavily involved is how to promote digital as well as functional literacy across the board in India. I work with an organization called India Literacy Project, Pratham Foundation for Excellence, which is another very good organization here. All of these and a variety of others. Vibha, there's a variety of organizations which promote education literacy. Now, in the context of India, where the people are even more isolated, especially the poor, this is very important. ILP has developed a lot of digital technologies to be able to educate people. I also work with the Rotary Club based in Chennai to promote literacy in some of the most poorer part. And how do you deliver laptops or even tablets? And how do you load that with relevant digital content? So they're just not browsing the internet, but looking at content which can give them valuable skills. All of these things have to be pursued. Your spouse was fortunate to work with the Gates Foundation. ILP is now working where Gates Foundation has provided them funds to pursue various digital literacy initiatives in and around India. And this is a problem set. There is no easy answer to it, but it is something we have to pay attention to. And it has to be paid attention to, I firmly believe, from the very primary education to all the way through to colleges. But you have to start at the very bottom to make digital accessible to even the most poor, because we have to make sure that the next generation becomes quite productive and digitally very literate. India is just exciting for me in that sense, how fast mobile technology has spread. Now, how do you leverage that to provide digital literacy is very important.
Wow, Rajan, you never seem to tire. It is amazing that you are continuing to work in the United States, India, and in various parts of the world in education and all that. And to everybody out there, I'm looking for people with diverse backgrounds, different interests, because technology is no longer an island. We are totally immersed in every aspect of life. So technology has enormous implications on practically everything we do in our life. So please come forward, talk to us. Rajan, it's always exciting talking to you. And I always learn something new. I did not know half of your story before we started this meeting. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Shankar, and I really appreciate the opportunity.